Hello, can you hear me? Okay, you can? You can hear me? Okay, awesome. Great. So thank you for doing this. It's a lot of fun. I've only done one debate so far with the tournament, which I got into round two, so that's cool. And I would be remiss, I'm wearing my Bernie shirt because we're talking about public finance. So we got to talk about public financing of elections. Got to support my boy. So first, we're going to go and do the resolution. This House believes, or this House should institute publicly funded elections. For the House, we're going to call it the U.S. government, and institute meaning we're going to put a policy in place for publicly funded elections. I will define publicly funded elections during my plan, during when I talk about the policy. So let's go into a little bit of background. So right now, with the donations that are going into the political system, we had $6.8 billion go into the election in 2016, which has a corrupting influence on what the political politicians are doing. You have organizations such as ALEC, they come up and these Republican bill mills allow these candidates that were bought by by these donors to then do their bidding. So we have representatives that aren't in it for the best interest of the people, but are in it for the best interest of themselves. So the inherent harm here is corruption and the lack of democracy and the creation, and we are proven to already have an oligarchy. So the harm here is that we're losing democracy and that we're actually not giving the people a voice with the lack of democracy, and we're also increasing the chances of corruption of donors that are being able to do that. So there's the harms. So the plan. Public elections will be funded by the taxpayers after a candidate has raised $5 from a total of 500 people per that election cycle. That will then unlock the funds that are necessary for a candidate to be given the calculated cost of a campaign that would be created by a committee that we'd also create, which we would call the Public Financing of Elections Committee. So therefore, if we're doing an election in San Diego or we're doing one in Dallas, this committee would then be able to find out what the going rate for a campaign is so we can actually have a fair race. And this would be passed by constitutional amendment. So therefore, we can deal with all the costs of everything of that nature, because this is a debate. We only got 20 minutes here. So, and then this solves by allowing candidates to not go to the donors and not be held to that corruption, therefore allowing our democracy. I have three advantages. I'll go over them in the next time, but I'll bullet point them now. Advantage one, everybody can run. Advantage two, FaceTime with constituency. And advantage three, the death of the donor class.
It's your turn. Okay, very good. I got my voice here. Can you hear me? Excellent. All right. So publicly financed elections. It's an interesting idea, one that we've tried on a voluntary basis in America before. We have an option that people can take public financing currently, which most politicians don't unless they can't raise enough money to supersede it. It's been very rare that presidential candidates have taken it, and very few of those who have taken it have won. Last year, in 2000... I forget which year, 2008, Obama spent about $975 million adjusted on his campaign. Huge amounts of money get spent. It's hard to know that, well, let's see. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the sky tends to be the limit on private financing because it is driven by the cost of advertising and other competitive interests. I'm curious to hear, on what kind of basis we're going to try to create the baseline. I understand that there's going to be a committee, but exactly, what's the goal for reach for candidates to try and access these kind of things? And also, I want to know how it is that we're going to, what's the right word? How are we going to control the avenues of communication that happen during the campaign? So right now we have super PACs and we have other political organizations, unions, corporations, others that get involved in the political arena by putting out various kinds of speech, which is generally protected. The Supreme Court protects political speech more than any other type. How is it that we're going to take money out of politics if the only change we're making is how much money sits right with the candidate's campaign, I think this is just going to chase the money out into other areas. We saw that when we had limited campaign finance reform in the past. We had the rise of these super PACs and other organizations. People find a way to express their voices in a country that's founded on free speech, one way or another, especially political speech. I don't think you can take the money out of politics unless you take the power to influence business and the economy away from the government, which is pretty much impossible, since their job is to make decisions that have a significant impact on these things. So long as the government has the power to create significant impact on people's lives and property, I think it's important that people be able to use their voice and their property in order to have an impact on government. That is the fundamental nature of democracy. And I think this creates a kind of more limited democracy.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So I guess for clarification of the plan, so we're looking at the federal scope. So obviously, like states and things of that nature. I'm sorry. We're looking at the U.S. federal government. I'm sorry. So everything. So we're talking about local elections, state elections. We're talking about federal elections, presidential elections. The current plan that you said now only really pertains to the presidency of the United States. So we really need to update it to be able to make sure that we talk about everything. Now, as far as the committee itself, yes, it's a new government committee that we'd have to create, but that is going to allow for the ability for us to make sure that we're judicially using that money, so we don't have the overreach of the government that I think you're talking about right now. So we make sure that we're not giving like a small town in the middle of nowhere, $1 million to run a campaign, and giving San Diego or other major city, Pittsburgh or whatever, a small amount of the money that isn't going to be comparable to the effect of the super PACs and the property. And yes, and you're right, there is still the law on the books, but as far as for the purposes of this debate, we are going to leave the other laws such as Citizens United and all of these things intact. All I'm saying is that we're going to allow for the publicly financing of elections. And I guess I'm going to have to amend my plan, and I'm sorry for that. I guess I should have wrote it better myself. But basically, the amendment to the plan would be that I don't want to move my target here. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to do that. So for the plan itself, give me 2 seconds here. Give me cost of the campaign, public funding elections, constitutional amendment. Oh, right. That if you do take public financing elections, you can't take donor money. I forgot to add that to the plan. So if you're taking public financing of elections, you're not going to do donor money anymore, except for the initial 500 that you needed from 5 different people to be able to prove that you're a good candidate and you can actually influence people to be able to support you on that campaign. So that's the difference of that plan, is that you have to get $5 donations from 500 people. And I know I just spent the greater half of my time, but I'll go in Advantage 1 as fast as I can. So Advantage 1, anyone can run. This removes the barrier of entry. A lot of people have to receive a lot of money just to be able to run for office and the influence that they need. If they have the ability to raise $5 from 500 people, this lowers the barrier of entry to allow younger people, people of color, different minorities to be able to run for office instead of having to have a powerful list of previous donors to be able to give you that chance to be able to run. So publicly funding elections will allow a better chance to have more of a pool of democracies to have better candidates overall.
Okay, well, I'll do a little last in, first out, since it's fresh in my mind. The everyone runs idea is certainly a nice proposal, but I would say that the current system already allows this to a large degree. The party system that we have is organized largely on the idea that the larger political organization supports individual party members, and in turn, party members support the organization. So it is a way to collectively pool money together and direct money and other kinds of in-kind support to candidates who represent that party well. And so many people have come up in the party system, getting support from the party. They're not individually wealthy themselves, but with sufficient support from the party, they can get connected to donors who can help them out with their campaign. And we see a large number of people run for office who are not especially rich or especially politically connected. Bernie Sanders is a good example. He's not an especially rich man. He never was. He may have some political connections, but he's one of those politicians who came up kind of the hard way, and with support from the party. That can happen. Barack Obama is another good example of a man who rose from not being from an especially wealthy or connected family to being president of the United States. So I think we can see that the current system already has that handled, just with a more organic and natural system that we've had for quite some time. I'm a little concerned about the plan because it's optional, and we already have an optional plan, and we see time and time again that any candidate who is capable of raising more money than the public is willing to provide through these financing methods will do so. So generally speaking, it's not going to limit corruption except among people who can't really get a lot of money in the first place. So that doesn't seem very effective in resolving the harms of corruption if the system is entirely optional. And like I said, again, we have this, a flood of money in every other direction possible if it were not optional, but apparently it is. I mistook that because I assumed in order to solve the harms that would be necessary. So I have that objection to resolving the harms. I also want to say that, let's see, I got that. My notes are a little rough. For those watching at home, we both had about 5 to 10 minutes to prepare for this debate. We just decided to do it ad hoc. So if we're a little disorganized, that's what's going on. I wanted to make a statement. Let's see how much time I got. All right, 33 seconds. That democracy is about voting. It's not about spending money. So we all go to the vote, all go to the polls, and we cast our vote, and that determines who is president or who is congressman or any other position. Money is used in order to convince you of something, but ultimately, we each are capable of making up our own mind. Lots of information is out there. We should be able to figure out who it is we want to represent us. And, if we're good democratic citizens, it probably doesn't matter how much money they spend.
Okay, I like that free will argument at the end there. All right. So going on to the rebuttal that you were saying, it says the party system already kind of creates that ability to limit. Well, unfortunately, the party system is also pretty corrupt. So you have, the Republican Party and a lot of like the local areas kind of like anoint somebody that they know already within the system. So it doesn't allow a lot of people to just say, hey, I'm coming in and doing it. I hate to use personal anecdote here, but I'm going to use it as a candidate. When I ran for San Diego City Council, I had to, go into these rooms and talk to these people when they already had people in mind. So a lot of them use how much money they can raise as one of their barriers to say, oh, they're going to support this person over the other, which is why they chose a rich real estate investor over, a community activist. So there is a lot of fighting within the party system. So it's not a perfect system. So also it doesn't allow candidates that are independent. It doesn't allow candidates that don't have a party structure within their community. This would allow it to open it up to everybody, regardless of what party they are. So it kind of creates a nonpartisan type of structure, which is more democratic. And then as far as the idea of it being optional and the harms, it's a very strong argument. But I have to say that Bernie kind of blows it out of the water, because Bernie did it optionally without any law in place, which he allowed him to basically make this movement and make this possible. However, the reason it needs to be done within the law books is because Bernie was very unique within that period of time. Bernie was a specific brand that allowed for the idea of this public funding idea to work, but it doesn't work in every situation. That is why we have to continue to bring it up within the local community, because you're talking about millions across the country donating $27 when we need to think about the local ability of a town of maybe of 100,000 or 1 million having to have that same effect to be able to run an effective campaign. And then as far as democracy is about, I'll respond to your statement at the end of my time here. And then, so I'm going to go in advantage 2. So also an advantage 1, I take it out because it's non-unique. The Democratic Party doesn't really make it better. And then advantage 2. So face to face with the constituents. Right now, candidates spend a lot of time talking to donors on the phone rather than going door to door to actually knock and talk to people about the issues. In fact, they spend so much time with the donors that it's almost their exclusive voice that they have. So when you're talking about democracy, it doesn't really allow it to happen. And data shows that a current elected congressional member actually spend 6 to 8 hours making phone calls. So they're not actually legislating either. So it just propagates a problem that we have to create donors. So we have to be able to create a new idea.
Okay, interesting. I certainly like FaceTime with politicians is a pretty good thing. Although certainly in a small town or even maybe a county, that's a pretty realistic proposition. However, when you're talking about national elections or congressional elections that are statewide in states like California or other large states, I just don't think it's practical for politicians to have significant face time with the citizenry, and the time they spend raising money is not going to significantly impact their ability to get their message out to the people, hold rallies or other things. We saw plenty of fundraising. You can get people to fundraise for you if you have a significant amount of money or pull. So it's not necessarily the candidate tying up all their time, but we're talking about national elections. We're talking about the ability to reach hundreds of millions of people. I don't think FaceTime really enters into it, and we're not seeing candidates being unable to raise money and to campaign at the same time. I'm sure they don't enjoy it. No one really likes calling people on the phone and asking for their money, but that's just kind of part of the reality. I don't think it has a significant impact in democracy or the value of our lives. Now let's talk a little bit about the party system. I mean, you say that it is corrupt, and all political systems can have some measure of corruption in them. However, it does seem to work in elevating people to office. I gave some good examples. Maybe it doesn't do that all the time, but it often does. And sure, money talks sometimes. That's going to be true no matter what we do. Now, some of the problems that we have with the threshold here, the $5 from 500 people, it sounds pretty nice. It's got 2 5s in it, which is cool. But it's a pretty small threshold. We're talking about $2,500 or $2,500 here. I can easily see organizations getting together and saying, look, you pay us $2,500 over here. We can get a list of 2,500 American citizens on Facebook who are actually, you pay us $4,000. We'll pay them all $6 a piece to donate to your campaign so that you can get however much money that public financing is. Maybe you can kick some back to us over here on our advertising firm so that you can buy some elections, and we're all good, right? And then anybody can get this money so long as they can hire one of these agencies. Unfortunately, people game these kinds of systems all the time. And not only that, but this low barrier to entry could lead to a flood of candidates in any given race, some of them serious, some of them not, making it very difficult for voters to make choices amongst all these people or to understand what their different positions are, and badly fracturing the outcome, which could lead to somebody with, 3% of the vote getting elected. You'd have to pair it with some further election systems that pare down, and changing our election systems costs money. Lots of challenges there, I think. Leave it at that.
Awesome. Great. So to go back and address the plan critique, when you say the barrier of entry is too low and it basically anyone can do it, and then putting too much out there will divide the vote up into too many pieces. Well, you can kind of look at the Republican election. They still survived, right? They still got Trump in the office, and there was way more candidates on their side than it was on our side. So really, the amount of candidates that are in a pool doesn't necessarily change it, because we'd still have runoff systems that we already have in place, and that's why we have primaries in the first place. And our democracy is already kind of built to have multiple candidates running at one time, and it gives people more of an opportunity to actually pick the person that they actually care about. And I think that dynamic is more of a democratizing type of situation. So I think, to turn that argument, I think it's more democracy the more people that you have to vote for, because more people have the ability to run, and there's more opportunity for different situations and different issues to arise. As far as your takeout for my advantage too, a lot of your argument that you were talking about doesn't really fully take out my advantage, because of the fact that you're talking about the larger scale. You keep talking about, the federal size of the election, and then the threshold for the barrier of entry, but we're really talking about, this also really helps the smaller scales, because the smaller scales actually generate more candidates and more candidates across this country, building our bench for a better democracy and the political environment that we have. So the bundling and the things that you're talking about, you would have to make sure that every one of those people are donating to every one of those individual campaigns. So the bundling that you're talking about, it's almost like they would have to do a power of attorney, because like you can't donate and act blue in somebody else's name if you're donating to a political candidate. That's illegal. That's against campaign finance law. So I believe it would also be the same for this as well. So when you're talking about federal election law, you wouldn't be able to donate in somebody else's behalf. You would have to physically do it. So that individual would have to do it. So that may that would dampen the fraud and keep it more in line. Now, as far as my third advantage, the death of the donor class. Right now, we have a lot of donors that are giving the campaign time and time again. And a lot of these donors are expressing that they're actually tired of giving so much money to these campaigns. And a lot of them die off, and not die off literally. Some of them do literally, but some of them actually, stop giving. And then that basically puts an awkward situation of where the money is coming from, because if donors are not giving any more over here but are giving more over here, then it puts a lopsided side of the donors. So if the donor
the clock is kind of a brutal mistress. So, especially 3 minutes. We're probably used to somewhat longer sections. So, the death of donors. I'll start from the top again. There's always been donors, and there will always be donors. I promise. There are people with moneyed interests in America who are interested in political outcomes and will always cough up money to feel like they are influencing the government and have some sort of measured control over their lives. I'm not sure that they usually do, but they certainly believe that. And in some cases, perhaps they're successful, but it's the right as Americans to say, you know what, I'm in the mining business and I'm really interested in government policies that make mining better, that allow me more opportunities to hire more people and deliver more ore customers in the steel mills and so on and so forth. It's their right to try and promote those kinds of ideas. And, and they will. They always will. And that brings us back to really the kind of, I think, critical weakness of the plan. I've mitigated some of the advantages. And yes, there's still, there's a little bit there. Politicians maybe don't have to spend as much time on the phone. And you get slightly more people having the opportunity to run for office, perhaps too many. We'll come back to that. So these are kind of small benefits, but the big problem is because it's not a mandatory system, the people who are going to get elected and who will win will not use it. They will instead take private money, of which there is no shortage, as you pointed out, the huge amount that gets spent, and they will probably crush everybody who has public financing, as they almost always have, and they probably will continue to do so, which is going to destroy every advantage the plan has. Unless you can somehow lock down people from using their money for political speech, you can never really balance the playing field. You can only kind of make a little league for everybody else who wants to play in the kiddie pool. And I'm not sure that really gets us anywhere in terms of corruption and democracy. And by the way, $2,500, yes, the Republicans had quite a few people, but all of those guys are going to have to come up with millions of dollars in order to run their primary campaign. If the threshold is $2,500, man, the sky is the limit. There are so many people who would be happy to spend $2,500 to have whatever it is that it takes to run in a scale election, especially president. If we determine, well, they're going to need at least 20 million. Would you spend $2,500 to get 20 million? Would you find a way? Will people find a way to get certain people to donate $5 so that you could have that money and maybe spread it around? Yeah. Are there laws against it? Yes. Are people going to try and circumvent them? Absolutely. That's a big payday just waiting out there for people to get. So I think that's a real challenge. And ultimately, so long as the system is optional, it's got no way to really realize the benefits that it's aiming to achieve.
Okay, awesome. So going back to the critique about the fact that, people are still going to run with money because the plan is optional. But the thing that this plan allows, and this is why the government should do this, is because it allows people to actually have the ability to run in the first place. So if they didn't have any option, a lot of people don't run. The barrier of entry is too high. So therefore, good candidates that may be a working class person, a nurse, a teacher, a student, that has good ideas that may want to run for office, they have the ability to run on that platform. Now, will they have all the money in the world and the super PAC or whatever? No, they won't. But the reality is that other candidate is going to use donor money and is not going to use the $2,500 threshold and is not going to use a cent of public money. So if they want to privately fund their elections, then have at it, Haas. They can do it. But the thing about it is there's going to be an option for a public citizen to be able to run on the public money, which allows that democracy to actually happen. Because if it wasn't that way, then a lot of these candidates have no chance in hell to be able to actually make an impact in their communities. So really bringing it back to the choice is clear. You either choose publicly funded money or you don't choose publicly funded money and you privately finance your campaign, which you are more than welcome to do. But just remember, the other candidate is going to be like, hey, I'm not taking any private money. I'm taking public money. Now, this is the theoretical part of this debate where it's like, will those people win elections? But that's not what we're really talking about. But the chances of those people winning those elections are there. So if one person can win on publicly financed election versus an oil guy, then that's a greater benefit for the country because then that person's not bought out. Therefore, I do have solvency. Because if one candidate across this country were to win against a moneyed platform with publicly financed elections, that's a greater good. Because then you're no longer having to worry about the possibility of always being outmatched by the money dollar for dollar. So when you come into to advantage one, the fact is when you say that the party system allows us to have this free market, of candidates, it really doesn't. So anyone can run if you're independent, libertarian, green, whatever you are. And that's hugely important for democracy, which makes America a better place overall for that. And then you advantage two, more FaceTime with constituencies. I know you say there's not a lot of bandwidth, but the thing about it is on the small scale campaigns, it does. The large scale campaigns are a different animal. So this scales. This scales from large to small just fine, but the smaller ones are going to be taking a huge advantage from this. And then as far as the death of the donor class, again.
So I'll start from bottom to top again. Let's talk about this small scale issue. I agree that this plan has a little bit more teeth when it comes to, say, like a local township election or maybe a county election. If it's a rural county that's kind of small, everybody knows each other. But then I would ask the question, is the money really that necessary at that point? I mean, if you live in a small county and you're able to have FaceTime with constituents by going door to door, why do you need a lot of money in order to run? Or if you don't need a lot of money to run, why do you need this program in order to raise that small amount of money, since it already has this threshold? I just think that it's sort of a self-solving problem. And you say that if one candidate, one shining example, for example, Mr. Jose Calabero could win the Council District 7 in San Jose, it would all be worthwhile. And it's a noble thought, but I tend to think that it already happens. There are already people who are dark horse candidates who don't have a lot of money to start out with, make allies, figure out ways to raise money, become popular, get a voice of the people, then get more support from people who are looking out for candidates to support with their causes, and they get elected. So it already happens. We already have those special people. There's maybe not a ton of them, but the world isn't filled with special people. So that's the way things go. So I think the solution that you're trying to achieve already exists for the most part. So, I appreciate that you have these more candidates out there, perhaps tons more, but you really have to ask yourself the question, as a taxpayer and somebody who supports the system, how much money are we spending and how much benefit are we getting? So one person getting elected could be worth how much you said the election cost? Was it $6 billion? Is that worth one office in a local county somewhere? I'm not so sure that it is. I think we really have to be practical and pragmatic when it comes to these kinds of things. And, we've had a steady democracy for more than 200 years, with one exception, Civil War, a little bit of a problem there. But for the most part, our system of democracy and political activism is messy and ugly and weird as it is, has ensured the peaceful transition of power for hundreds of years and the world's longest standing democracy. So I'm not sure that it really needs this system all that badly. And when I look at it, I see tons of candidates possibly running just to make money, not really because they have a real political agenda. It worries me a little bit. And as for a barrier to entry under the existing system, I come from Washington State. We had a guy named Good Space Guy that would run every year. He ran for governor every year I lived in the state on weird, strange platforms about putting people on the moon or orbiting satellites, some, all kinds of strange stuff. And, he managed to do it every year without public financing. So, and I know about him, so he got the word out one way or another.
Great. The big argument you were saying is like it already happens. Like plan already is there, so why should we implement plan when plan already exists? But it doesn't because it so I have to assume that you think that when it happens, it's a good thing. So therefore, that does solve if it happens. But so therefore, when I say my argument with plan, my plan makes it happen better. So therefore the argument of it happens already, so we shouldn't have it because it's already great. Well, I make it better, so therefore it's greater. So on that point alone, I even have greater solvency with your argument on that point. Also, you said 6.8, was the total. 6.8 was the total of the entirety of the election of every race across the country, including the presidential race. So it's kind of conflation to say that $6.8 billion is going to be used on a county. That's not actually how it's going to work. And that's why the commission exists. So therefore it won't allow the ability for that conflations to happen. And as far as your moon landing gentleman, he could he raise $5 from 500 people? I mean, maybe, right? If he does, then that's pretty impressive because he has some pretty crazy policies. And then, so you also do have a barrier to entry at some level. Like who's going to give $5 to a guy to run for office if they're going to use their taxpayer dollars to do it? So it makes it a little bit more difficult to make that claim. So when we have to take a look at the actual plan itself and everything that's going on, we have to take a look at what with the idea of if it happens, it's good that we have people running from office, because you do claim quite a bit throughout the debate that the Democratic Party allows the people from the ground up to come up. You can make these connections with people. You can do all these type of things. So you're really for having people come out and go and do these things that are possible. So if they're able to get $5 from 500 people, they are getting out there in the community. They're doing a really good job. They probably are good candidates because they're able to hit that pavement to actually be able to make that difference. So the more people that are having the ability to go out into the community and talk to massive amount of people and actually do that is actually better in the net good for everybody, because then it's not isolated to two elitist class people or maybe a possible community person. But we need to be able to allow that community person to stand on that footing, regardless how much money is over here or how much money is over here. People need to have the ability to stand on their own 2 feet with the public's help. And that's why this plan has the ability to end the corruption and have our candidates be more accountable to us.
So greater solvency, it's an interesting idea. It immediately made me think, hey, darling, I would like to have a Maserati so that I can go to work. And my wife says, you already have a car, darling. Why don't you drive the truck to work? I'm like, I would like greater solvency. The Maserati would make me much happier. It would be a great deal of fun. And I only use this to illustrate the idea that, yes, more is better generally. More wonderful, interesting candidates running seems nice. To a point. There's always too much of a good thing. Again, if I have 5,000 candidates for president to choose from, I'm perhaps not the happiest person in the world. It's going to make life a little bit difficult if I want to do the due diligence to research and understand all these people. I would like them to get screened out somehow ahead of time, whether that's through the party system or some other possibility. But I don't think raising $2,500 from people is difficult in this day and age of internet connectivity. I'm amazed at how much people raise from Kickstarter, GoFundMe, things like that, which gets onto, can crazy people get the money? Yeah, people sell their souls on eBay, or at least they tried to before they made it illegal. Crazy people can find a way to raise something from 500 people around the world. Seen it many times. We all have on the internet. It can be kind of a crazy place. Is crazy stuff bad? No, but it does clutter up the political process, which, like I said, we already have. It has its problems and its challenges, but it has proven largely stable and successful over the years. And we have had many come from behind candidates who are exceptional people who can break through. Would we like more of them? Maybe so. But is this plan the way to do it? I'm not so sure. Now, you bring up that we wouldn't be spending $6 billion on a county, and I understand that, of course. But what I'm saying is, because this has such a low threshold, you would have people from all over the country thronging to try and get this money so that they could participate in the political process as their very own candidate. And that would really lead to a plethora of people who want this money. So either you have a limited pool of it and you have to spread it far and wide and nobody really gets enough to run for election, or you meet that mandate and you're churning out tons and tons of cash so that maybe you find that one diamond in the rough of the hordes of people who want to get out there and have a go. I think it's better to have the current system where there are already challenges. You have to persuade people to help you. You need to go out and find allies. You need to make political connections with existing groups. And if you do that, then you have a real shot at success.
Awesome, great. So I'm going to go in right into my voters of why I feel that I've taken this debate now. So first, I'd like to say that my plan does solve because it allows the opportunity for more people to be running into the democratic process, and it does limit the ability of corruption of those candidates that are elected by the public finance system. Also on the advantages versus the disadvantages. First, the advantage that anyone can run. It wasn't really refuted, and it also strengthens the disadvantages of my opponent because it allows us to actually intensify the impacts of having more people run. In his scenario of it already exists, so therefore my advantage actually makes that better. So therefore that's a huge voter on my part. Also, the second advantage of FaceTime with the constituents and actually getting out there and not spending so much money with the donors. It wasn't really refuted other than it's not practical, but at smaller races, it's extremely practical. So therefore, in a sense, it's actually a net gain for that ability. Also, death of the donor class, we really didn't get to talk about it too much. I tried to make an argument about donor inequality, about how some donors don't have as much money as the others, but I didn't make it in that debate, so I'm sorry, I can't call it a voter. And then the last part is that the choice is clear, it's optional, so it doesn't impinge on the ability of free speech on the other behalfs of the other laws that exist. So donors are still going to be able to donate to campaigns that choose not to do public financing in elections. So it allows both everything to exist and actually improve democracy. So therefore, I will take it from that debate.
Great. For my summary, I would just say that this is a system that could cost us a great deal of money and deliver very little benefit, if any benefit at all. A mass of candidates flooding the woodwork, some merely wanting to take advantage of free government money, some of them with serious political aspirations, some of them perhaps simply deluded, crowding the ballot box, crowding the marketplace with many voices, many of them probably saying the same thing, a few of them saying something different. Meanwhile, those who have the real means, who are politically organized and serious about what they're doing, are going to ignore the system, raise private money, and have much more powerful, much more impactful campaigns, and leave all these other guys in the dust. So we will have spent our money and gained almost absolutely nothing, much like the current financing system. My lovely cat here agrees with me. So it's a nice idea. I like the spirit of it, but I'm afraid it's impractical in the world we live in and not really that needed. Good character, voting intelligently, looking up candidates, trying to learn about them, making intelligent choices are all more important than ensuring every Tom, Dick, and Harry gets a chance to run for president, which is pretty much what I think we're going to see with a plan like this if it were implemented, and the financials of it would soon, I think, break down and leave us back where we were to square one. and maybe there would be a lot of interesting campaign buttons, but would also have empty pockets. I'll leave it at that. It was a fun debate. Thanks for inviting me kind of on the spur of the moment to try this out. Steve Lee, if you're out there, feel free to vote against me. But everybody else, I think you should carefully consider my points and vote your conscience in this debate. Thank you.